stranger or a guest, but like a child at home.
As I entered a pulpit this morning, I wanted to share with you the story of a young woman who lives in Mexico, who is a listener, an online listener of our ministry, who I've connected with a little bit over, through our Facebook page and other things. It's really wonderful how people are connecting to us from Japan and Mexico and other parts of the world through our online ministry. And this young woman, unfortunately, has been battling. She's been connecting with our church for a few years now, but just in the last year, she's been battling cancer, and it got pretty serious, and she's been going through months and months, almost a year, since surgeries and radiation and chemotherapy. And just this week, I received news from her that she's cancer-free, and it's just a great thing when that happens, and I just celebrate with her, and I know she'll hear this and know that our community is also celebrating and holding her as well. So here's what she wrote to me in this message yesterday. She started, "Good minister." And I like that, just in case you're looking for a salutation to I can think of some others that would not be as nice, but good minister. She writes, "I need your advice. As you know, I am fine. I defeated cancer, but still need to take care of myself so the cancer won't come back. However, I wonder why. Why am I still here on this earth? Why is God watching me? Why is He good with me? Sometimes I feel there are people who deserve it more than me. I know I should be grateful, but I'm afraid to know that I am here for a purpose and I have no idea what that purpose is." I immediately wrote back to her and said, "Your timing is great. I'm about to do a sermon on finding our purpose." So I invited her to tune in today to hear it. How do we find our purpose? What does that even mean to us? Last week, in her very inspiring service and sermon, Barbara said, "There's only one thing necessary, only one thing that we're called to do, to protect and tend the spark, the sacred spark that burns inside of us." I love that. So many people get caught thinking that they have to find one singular purpose for their life. And if they don't find it, then they've failed. But Barbara reminds us that the one thing that we are called to do is to tend that sacred spark within. And she goes on to say, discovering how to do it as we move through the seasons of our life, that is our work to do. And what I hear in this is that the foundational one thing we must do is keep that spark alive, yet how we do it, the many different ways, is unique to each of us. Now, for some of us, there is one clear thing that we feel called to do above all else that allows us to feel that flame inside of us burn brightly. Some people discover one thing, such as teaching or creating art or designing homes or helping the sick or the dying or the homeless. Mother Teresa found her calling so clearly. This current pope, how about this current pope who's just inspiring the world in so many ways? People find what they're meant to do in the world, and it's beautiful. But for so many of us, there may not be one thing, but many things over the course of a lifetime. And Barbara reminds us that at the core, it's about fanning the flame of inspiration within us in whatever ways we can throughout our lives. Last night I was with our church children and youth choirs. They're having their choir camp, so I went up to Shoto last night to be with them and to eat with them and to lead a chapel service with them. And I reminded them that the theme of All Souls this month in September is inspiration. And I also told them how this entire church year, sort of from September through June, we have an overarching frame, and we're talking about looking for ways to understand and discover love's power to hold us through difficult times, through those gaps and disconnects in our lives between us and other people, between us and the world around us. So it was a beautiful night in Shoto, Oklahoma last night, and we gathered in a big circle, and I wanted to instill in these young singers the power of music to inspire and to help us. And I wanted them to understand that singing in the church choir is about much more than just music. It's ministry. I explained how every Sunday there is someone in the church, and often more than one, who has just been diagnosed or divorced or lost a loved one or is contemplating suicide or is fighting depression or addiction or is living with someone who is fighting depression or addiction, or they themselves have been the victim of violence or lost their job or lost their home or lost a pet, or 1,000 other things that the people who walk in to our church are going through every Sunday. There's someone dealing with one of those things. And often it's not the sermon, I explain to them, that gives people the inspiration to go out and face another week or another day or just this day, that it's often the music. And so we passed around a candle last night, and I asked them to think of a song or the lyric from a song that has inspired them or has helped them through a difficult time in their life. It was really fun. These young people are so incredible, and they're so bright, and they're so thoughtful, and they shared lyrics from rap songs, pop songs, church songs, and all kinds of songs I'd never heard of before. And they shared some really difficult struggles that they have been encountering or have encountered in their lives. And they told each other how the words of the song had given them some perspective or some hope to carry on. And I told them about a song that has become a very important song for me during really hard times in my life. It's Louis Armstrong's song that has the line, "And I think to myself, what a wonderful world." I explained that I've been through some really low times. And I told them of one time when I was so low, and I went out in the morning into my backyard, sunny spring day, and the birds were chirping up in the trees, and it felt to me like they were mocking me. How dare they sound so happy and carefree when I am feeling so low and so burdened? I usually delight in hearing the birds singing in the trees in the morning. So it was a stark reminder of how low I had gone. And I shared with them that I've learned over the years that our emotions are like the clouds. They move and they pass through. Sometimes they move quickly, and sometimes it seems like they're not moving at all, but they are, and they do shift and move. And even our most difficult feelings pass. And so I've learned that things always get better, and that even if we feel like they can't and they're not, and we can't even imagine being happy again, I've learned that in time, with love, and with friends, with community, with nature, and all the blessings of life, that it will become beautiful again. So at points in my life now, even in the worst of times, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Even when I can't feel it, I can think it in those moments, because I know that it will be again if I hold on. In Barbara's sermon last week, she talked so beautifully about how as life goes through its many changes, as we experience deaths and divorces, diseases and dilemmas of all different kinds, that sometimes it becomes more clear in our suffering what we have to do to keep that spark that's within us alive. The other day I was home and I heard my wife Anitra was being interviewed. It was a telephone interview by a woman who had heard her talk a few years back about her motivation to help create the Tulsa Children's Museum. She was a part of a group of folks who did that. And Anitra was explaining that after losing our daughter back in 2006, she felt called to do something for children as a way of extending the influence of our daughter's life to others. Now, working on creating the museum, this fanned the spark of life in my wife like nothing else. She was just so alive as she talked about it and thought about it and worked on it. And she still is working with the Children's Museum, and you could just tell how it brings her soul, sets her soul on fire. Now, I don't think that creating children's museums is my wife's one and only purpose in the world. But it was the thing at that point that helped keep her spark alive. One of the things, one of the most important things. And something wonderful about people acting on that spark of life within them is that it's contagious, like a fire, and one person's spark helps to light the flame of others' souls. I love the reading that Dave did for us from Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by the spark of another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us, especially in those times when we couldn't connect with it anymore. This morning, I want to share some questions that we can ask ourselves if we're trying to sort of discover what is my purpose, what is my higher cause at this time in my life? What am I meant to do? What does bring me alive and set my soul on fire? So if you're trying to find your purpose now in your life, like our friend in Mexico, there are 3 questions that I've found that do help people to discover what that is for them. They are, what are your gifts? What are my gifts? What am I passionate about? And what can I contribute? Now, we all have gifts to share. We all have some things that we're good at, that we either naturally are good at, or things that we've learned over time, skills and talents that we've honed. Some people are great poets, and others are great cooks or healers or artists. Some of us just relate really well with others. We can make people smile. We can cheer people up. We are great parents or whatever it is, but we all are good at something. We all have some gifts to share. So I read something from a woman named Maxine Dennis recently, and she wrote, "Cashiering in a supermarket may not seem like a very rewarding position to most, but for me it is. You see, I feel that my job consists of a lot more than ringing up orders, taking people's money and bagging their groceries. The most important part of my job is not the obvious. Rather, it's the manner in which I present myself to others that will determine whether my customers will leave the store feeling better or worse because of their brief encounter with me. By doing my job well, I know I have a chance to do God's work too," she writes. "Because of this, I try to make each of my customers feel special. While I'm serving them, they become the most important people in my life." What a gift. She knows that her attention and her kindness is making a difference every day. Discovering our gifts is the beginning of understanding our purpose. There's 1,000 coming-of-age stories, thousands of coming-of-age stories about young people discovering what they're capable of. I think The Wizard of Oz is, of course, the great classic coming-of-age story. Dorothy journeying along the yellow brick road, helps her discover who she is and what she's good at. Her companions along the way are also trying to find their gifts. The Tin Man wanted a heart so that he could feel. And of course, he spends the whole journey crying his eyes out and rusting himself because he's so sensitive. His tears, a sign of the incredible heart that he already has. He didn't need anyone to give it to him. The lion, filled with fear and trembling, thought he needed courage, went out looking for it, but constantly throughout the entire story acts in the face of fear, which is, of course, the definition of courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the willingness to act in the face of fear. And of course, the Scarecrow, who wanted a brain, he's the group strategist, the smartest among them. The point being that we all have gifts, and we often the things that we are longing for or even dissatisfied with often are a sign of what our gifts may be. Which leads me to passion. How do we know what we're passionate about? This is a very perplexing question, and it's very complicated. The other day on the radio, author Elizabeth Gilbert, maybe you heard her, she was doing a TED Talk, and she's talking about creativity and passion. And in it, she says, people often tell us to find our passion. And she said, usually people who found their passion are the ones who are telling us to find our passion. And the rest of us who haven't found our passion, it's not really helpful to have these folks telling us, go find your passion. So she explained that she gave her permission, if somebody says, find your passion, that you can give them the finger, she said. Now, being in the pulpit, I'm assuming she means like a thumbs up, but So needless to say, I'm a little wary of sharing this concept this morning, but just, thumbs up. But here are two ways that I've seen that are helpful for people to discover what they're passionate about. I suggest to people sometimes to ask, what breaks your heart? When has your heart been really broken? And I also ask people, this is a newer thing, but what can't you stand? What is it that you just cannot abide, cannot stand? Because usually what breaks your heart talks about what makes you deeply sad, and what you can't stand is usually what makes you very mad, and in many ways they're often flip sides of the same coin. For example, people say, I can't stand that there are people, children and otherwise, who don't feel safe in their own homes. Or I can't stand that every child in America does not have the opportunity for a good and decent education. Or cruelty to animals breaks my heart. Or the destruction of the environment. So we all have a lot of concerns, but often if we really dig deep, most of us have some life experience that has touched us in some really profound way that's left us with a particular deep emotional response to something in life underneath which is a deep reservoir of passion. Something we cannot stand for, something that truly breaks our heart. And when we discover what that is, in any given period of our life, we find what we stand for when we find what we can't stand. Now, I've thought about this a lot, and I know that my heart was broken when I was much younger through some experiences of being excluded. And so I have a deep passion within me for inclusion. It matters to me that people feel that they're valued and respected no matter who they are. In other words, I can't stand people being prejudged and excluded, be it for what they look like, or the clothes they wear, or their level of education, or who they love, or what they believe. which means from the most passionate part of my soul, I must stand for equality and inclusion of all people. You can amen that. That's all right. Even in the traditional service, we can amen once in a while. And knowing what I stand for then guides major decisions in my life. Do you know what you stand for? If not, try asking yourself what you cannot stand. What breaks your heart more than anything else? If you're struggling to discover what you're called to do in this season of your life, spend some time thinking about what you're good at, what you love to do. Discover what brings you alive with passion or curiosity, and then you'll come to know what contribution you might want to make. The only reason to do it, though, is because your one and only task is to tend the spark of the divine within you. Believe it or not, your spark lights other people's flames. May you have many times in your life when you have more than a spark, times when you feel as if your soul is on fire. And remember, even in the midst of the worst struggles that you're going through, even they can, and usually do, point you to your highest purpose. So whatever challenge you're confronting right now, no matter how hard or scary or lonely, let it help point you to the next right step. Remember always that this too, like the clouds, shall pass. And even when you can't feel it in the moment, you can think to yourself, what a wonderful world. Thanks for tuning in online. We are so pleased with all the different people who have been tuning in from all over the country and all over the world. If you have a chance to send me an email or connect with me in some way, let me know what you're finding, why you tune in, and what you're getting out of it. I would love to hear from you. And if you get a chance to make a gift to support this ministry, to become a partner, we would love to partner with you and have you be a friend of the church and somebody who is actually supporting us to create this congregation and the world that we're trying to create together. You can be a part of it, and every gift of every amount makes a difference. We really appreciate your support.